month means new reads recommended by Chris Hall of McNally Robinson Booksellers, who joins me in the studio now. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Simon.
Happy summer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Summer, a time of reading for many, a time to pick up a new book or maybe revisit an old one. You've got some new selections for us this month. What do you have queued up?
Absolutely. Well, let's start with a book called Underland. It's by Robert Macfarlane. And if you have to describe Robert Macfarlane as a certain kind of writer, you might call him a nature writer, I suppose. But he's a little bit of a lot of things. Certainly a poet somewhere inside of him. I don't know if he writes poetry, but he certainly writes poetically. He wrote a book a couple of years ago that I was talking about called Landmarks, and he collects words. He goes around, he's from the UK, and he collected these words that had disappeared, because as we as a culture get away from nature, we don't need some of the words that very specifically describe that tuft of grass. And so these words are disappearing. So this Landmarks was a collection of those words. And then he followed that up last Christmas, a big picture book illustrated by Jackie Morris called Lost Worlds, which was a continuation of that. There were words literally removed from the children's dictionary in England, and a lot of them were nature words because these kids didn't need these words about nature, I guess. And so this is a very beautiful picture book about these words that are disappearing, and says something about what our values are, I suppose, where we're going as a people. Anyway, so he's followed this Underland up with something a little bit different. It's literally about what's under our feet, what is underground, right from visiting the ancient cave art in some of the caves in Europe, and Bronze Age burial chambers and the catacombs of Paris, but as well as talking about the underground root systems of trees that are getting talked about more and more. I guess forests, as I understand it, trees are communicating with each other. They send word of disease, and so they shut down root systems so that they don't catch things from each other. And it's fascinating stuff if you get into it. But this book, every chapter takes you somewhere else.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like there's a real journey taking place right beneath our feet. It sounds like he's also looking at the past. Does he look to the future at all in the book?
I wouldn't say he looks too much to the future. It's really about the present, certainly the past and how it informs the present. It is nature writing in a sense, and so it literally changes the perspective on things. It's really interesting, the insights that he gets by taking it underground and literally talking about places that we don't give much thought to, I think.
No kidding. It sounds like a time-hopping, global-spanning sort of travel book.
Yeah, absolutely.
All taking place beneath us.
And he's a wonderful guide. You just get lost in the sentences, let alone the ideas.
Oh, fantastic. What else do you have for us?
Well, the next book I'm going to talk about is called The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. Colson Whitehead's been on my radar for a long time. American writer, black writer. We didn't really have a lot of success selling him, but he broke out with his last book called Underground Railroad, where he took the concept of a literal underground railroad. So the slaves that he was talking about escaping or running away literally got on a train that was a subway that went, and it had a very interesting effect on the history and the points he was making in that book.
Pulitzer Prize-winning novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very good stuff. So he's following up now with a book called The Nickel Boys, and The Nickel Boys is about one character in particular. Elwood Curtis is his name, and he's a great kid. He's got very talented in school, has all this potential. He's going to go to college early, and he just gets caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and gets convicted and sent to this juvenile reform school called Nickel
Academy. Or
Nickel
like
Academy.
That? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's just a brutal place. It's a place where they're trying to straighten out kids. I mean, there's a white part of the school as well as a black part, but the black part is particularly brutal. They beat them, they kill them, and it's based on a real school. They've discovered this field of bones outside of this academy in Florida, where these lost boys ended up just being forgotten and buried. And so it's not happy reading, but it feels very important certainly in the American story specifically, but beyond that, the way people have treated each other in the past, continue to treat each other. It's just a fantastic novel.
Well, Colson Whitehead is just really an author who can put a spotlight on these major moments in history in such a unique way, in a gripping way, in a dramatic way. And excited to hear about his latest novel, again, as moving as it would be, but as important as it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up next, Times Convert?
Yeah, let's lighten it up a little bit.
I was going to say this one's a little lighter, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Times Convert is by Deborah Harkness. Deborah Harkness made her name with a trilogy of books, the All Souls trilogy. It was a Discovery of Witches was the first title, and that's become a TV series on one of the stations. The second book, Shadow of Night, and then the Book of the Night, finishing it up. And so that was the world of witches. So now she's turned to what it takes to become a vampire.
Because why not?
Yeah,
From
absolutely.
witches to vampires.
And so it starts in the battlefields of the American Revolution. A young surgeon, Marcus McNeil, meets Matthew de Clermont. How could you not think Matthew de Clermont is a vampire? And he offers Marcus a chance at immortality. So Marcus takes him up on it and becomes a vampire. And then fast forward, the novel goes to contemporary day Paris, where Marcus has met and fallen in love, and
he's still around, of course.
Yeah. That's right, of course.
That
Love of his
immortality
life.
thing.
Yes, she would like to become a vampire as well, and just the challenges of being vampires. But it's very set in historical time, great historical fiction, great character, just fun romance at the center of it. So a little bit lighter beach reading, perhaps.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially fresh off the July 4th celebrations. You know, that
sure.
they're going back to the battlefield. From there, you go to Big Sky.
Yeah,
which is a book with a lovely cover.
It does. Yes.
What's going on here?
Well, this author, Kate Atkinson, I've talked to about her before on this show, about a book called Transcription, which was a spy novel. She's written a book, Life After Life, many others, but she has a mystery series as well, and this is going back to that mystery series. Her detective is Jackson Brody, so we've met him in case histories and One Good Turn, When Will There Be Good News, etc. And so this is just him. He's trying to retire to a quiet seaside village in England. Well, you know, as a detective in a mystery novel, that it's not going to stay quiet for long. It turns dark, and there's a seedy underside to this village, of course, and he gets embroiled in it. So it's I talked about this the last time. She's just able to capture that page-turning, what happens next excitement about reading a book, but also the great character, great place and setting, just a lot more than just a good story.
Yeah, those quiet, picturesque seaside towns never come as advertised, do they?
Not
Chris?
in a novel.
Especially a detective novel. And it sounds like a real page turner. And there's something always so captivating about these little seaside towns. I mean, our imaginations can run wild. And especially with an author like Kate Atkinson, she can just kind of take you on that journey, right? Along for the ride. Before you came on air, you were talking about binge reading, the idea of kind of just crushing these chapters. And she sounds like one of those authors who's just really designing novels that take you on those journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my term. Whenever I get into a conversation, somebody starts talking about TV, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I started telling people I binge read. I don't binge watch.
So you've got one more selection from your binge reading of this month.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up, or finish-up, I guess, with back to nonfiction. This is a great science book. This is She Has Her Mother's Laugh by Carl Zimmer. It's about heredity, about genetics, the story of genetics. Genetics is a complicated subject, and Carl Zimmer, that is, takes us to the history of, right from Darwin, who first prompted the notion of evolution, through the learning and the increased understanding about what it is that causes evolution, or the underlying pinning of genetics, etc. And so he's just a very good writer, so he can use metaphors to explain very complex things. A lot of what we think we know about genetics is proven to be wrong, but it's still kind of in our cultural knowledge bank, and and just the thousands of possibilities that come into us and create us from a genetic perspective. It's quite fascinating. Anyone who's worked on their family tree realizes just how this multiplies. The number of people involved in coming down to us as an individual is quite amazing. And then if you multiply that out by the number of potential genes and chromosomes, et cetera.
Well, and this has really come
amazing.
This has really come to the forefront with all the genetic testing that is now more accessible. I mean,
and he gets into that, and he takes us into the future. So, he's it's just a very good book. I really like. And I would recommend it for anyone trying to work on their family histories. A kind of a knowledge of genetics and what goes into creating it, I think, just gives it a depth and of understanding and so on that, I would recommend.
When I was preparing the post for the website, when I was doing some reading on She Has Her Mother's Laugh, I noticed that this book was named Science Book of the Year by The Guardian. And so that has me thinking this doesn't read like your standard textbook. It
does
really
not.
take you on a journey as well and get into those elements. And it sounds like he also uses a personal angle, his personal experience with his own daughters, right?
Yeah, he brings his own story in. He tells stories, and that's a big difference. I would say that about a lot of books, whether it's history, whether it's science, whether it's issues, that when a book can tell you the fact and that can kind of get tiring, but when they fold it into examples and stories and characters, you start to read it like I would argue you read a novel. That's the joy and the pleasure of reading novels. But in this case, you get a lot more. You get the knowledge of this science, you get the facts, but in a much more pleasurable sit back and relax kind of way.
Totally. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming by this morning. Always a pleasure to see you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you. I will.
And enjoy the binge reading.
Thank you very much.
Chris Hall of McNally Robinson Booksellers with his recommendations for what to read in this new month of July. If you want to see the recap, you can head over to classic107.com.